I'll take that word leadership and acknowledge the leadership role this government is playing in bringing in such a bill around an environmental reporting framework. And it is leadership because all we're hearing from across the floor, it's really about guilt, I suppose, embarrassment. 9 years they had to bring New Zealand up to an OECD standard of environmental reporting framework. Guilt, embarrassment. I mean, from the Green Party, it's more about envy and resentment that we are delivering in this space.
Point of order, Chris Farpoy.
I think you can probably predict what it is, Mr Chair, but I don't think he's referred to anything in the bill yet.
Yeah. Look, this is a debate. I'd ask the member and all members to concentrate on the content of Part 2. If a member hasn't got anything to contribute, then there's no need for this Part 2 to continue. And so I would ask that you concentrate on the substantive matter of Part 2 and focus your attention there. Matt Ducey.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. I'd just like to look at Clause 7, 2B, and it looks how we're going to compare the New Zealand's environment through this environmental reporting framework against a national and international standards. And I think that's right, that very much we are in a system now, we are in a global system, and it's going to be right that we're going to benchmark ourselves internationally against other countries. And in Clause 7, 2A, Mr Speaker, it's also about, in the synthesis report, looking at the changes to the state of the environment. So quite often, and I'm sure many people around this House in previous careers have been involved in reporting. And sometimes it's not exactly the report at one stage, but it's looking at multiples of reporting and looking at that variances between the state and the state of the environment and what has changed. And I think that measurement, that variance will be very important. And I think what we need to look at is a common theme if we thematically review the content of these clauses, Mr Speaker, and look at the content and the topics around the state of New Zealand's environment, the pressures that may be causing or have the potential to cause, as well as the impacts that the state of the environment and changes to the state may be having on such things as ecodiversity, the economy and public health. So when you look at those three key areas, the state of the environment, the pressures and the impacts, it's good to see that that runs through this whole piece of legislation. It shows up under the synthesis report, it also comes up under the domain report, and when we hear about the self-selection from the minister or ministers, I disagree. The domain reports will come up every 6 months, so within a pro-rata time frame, they will all come up. The domain reports of air, atmosphere and climate domain, freshwater, land and marine. So those topics and contents of the state, the pressures and the impact of environments are also included in the regulations, Mr Speaker. And Clause 18. So it's great we'll be able to track those three topics throughout the reports, synthesis and the domain reports. And I think Mr O'Rourke has touched on around the independence, but I disagree with that, Mr Speaker. I think it's very clear and outlined in 18, Clause 18, 2 and 3, around the consultation the ministers will go through with the government statistician, the commissioner, the public, iwi authorities and local authorities. And it is quite right that they will think about the issues, the state of the environment to do with that domain, the changes in the state to do with that domain, the pressures that are being put on those domains and the impacts of those domains on people's public health, the economy and the ecosystem. So very much, Mr Speaker, those themes promote accountability and they promote responsibility. And it's very much merging of three quite separate disciplines, but need the synergy going forward of the Environmental Secretary, which is then teamed up with the statistician. I think we all remember our T-tests from university days, as well as the Minister to drive this forward. I also would like to highlight, Mr Chair, the reference to untested data, because I think this is important. We need some protection around untested data. The New Zealand clean green image and the economy was at risk of... Mr Chair.
I call Dennis O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. In my last contribution, I said that there were 5